I know uploads has been slow lately, but I know some of you guys might already know what my schedule is like. It's pretty random between 2 to 4 days, and I like to try and post somewhere around between those days. But sometimes that's not always the case. It can even go beyond 4 days due to me just being busy with real life stuff or just me taking the time to enjoy myself, you know? Not like that though. Don't get me. Come on now. But with that being said, that doesn't mean that I haven't been thinking about making videos to put out for you guys to watch and enjoy. Anyways though, if you guys haven't been keeping up with CN lately, they recently released 2 new story characters, Sagny and Amadeus. And my goodness, look at them. I knew the story was pretty fire, but we're getting to the point that we're seeing centaurs? Sheesh. The first one we'll take a look at is Sagny. I'm not sure if I'm exactly saying his name right or what his actual name is like in global. I haven't really been catching up on the story like at all, and I don't really pay too much attention to it. He is part of the strategy, mythical, and Elis faction. His talent is pretty simple. His damage increases and will increase even more if there are other allies near him. After he deals damage to enemies, he can randomly reduce their mobility by 1 or 2 blocks, and they will also be inflicted with not being able to guard. These debuffs are really great against tanks. Also, if you just want to slow down enemies, it's especially good when up against like a rush team in PvP, if he's able to do that before they do anything. The only real issue with it is that it seems that you can actually prevent the mobility debuff easily by having something like Overlord's Badge, Mass Resist, and other things. He does carry a few AoE skills with them, so he'll be able to make good use of those debuffs. He's got this 1C skill that has a 1-turn cooldown that reaches 4 blocks long. In that 4 block range, you summon a Snow Owl. Then after doing so, you can move 2 more blocks to attack. After using the skill, it changes into Snow Owl Sense Pro, where it has a command effect where you have a 2% increase to crit the enemy within 10 blocks within the owl range? What? Okay, that range is ridiculous. But the 2% isn't a lot. Most likely, I would assume that it does more than that, but the text right here doesn't really say anything about that. But I would assume more than likely that it goes up to a total of 10% increase if it really actually does more than 2%. Because at that point, it doesn't really make any sense why it would be the case, even with that kind of insane range from the owl. For the passive on this thing, when Sagny uses a skill, the Snow Owl will also use that skill to attack from 2 blocks away, and the ranged soldiers will also attack with it. Then at the end of the turn, you can move the owl 2 blocks, but when it disappears, it gets replaced with the Cold Sharp Eyes skill once again, then rinse and repeat. So it looks like the owl works the same way how Michelle's clone works, with the exception that the owl can increase the chance of the enemy being crit, and can also attack using single target skills as well. Something else I'm seeing, however, is that I think you actually have to wait for the owl to disappear itself before you can use it again. Does seem fair to me in my opinion. I mean, it does have a 1-turn cooldown, and since it's a act again skill, you can easily refresh his other skills. His 2C skill is a single target that has a 1-turn cooldown, which does more damage against Lancers. It reduces their mobility by 2, but if the enemy already has a mobility reduction, then the skill does 20% more damage. Then his 3C skill is an AoE which has a 4-turn cooldown that reaches 3 blocks long and reaches 4 blocks around. Of course, it has a passive where it increases his int by 3% if there are allies 2 blocks near Sagny, and also within 15 blocks of the owl. Jeez, man. Already you can tell that he's going to be relying on this owl a lot. This 3C disables the enemy's active skills and not be able to receive any buffs for 2 turns. They will also gain an effect called Frost Blockade, where if they end their turn 2 blocks away from the owl, then they take fixed damage for 2 turns. You know, I was a bit surprised when he didn't have his own increased range like some of the other mages that we've been getting. But with this owl that he has, I think it makes up for it, and might be even more insane. If you guys ever use Michelle with the clone, it sounds like the owl will work pretty much the same way. But with Michelle, it's just with AoEs. With the owl, it's also the single target and the AoE. His 3C though, the passive has an incredible amount of range, at least with the owl, in order for him to get more increased int. And the 3C itself is really amazing for just the debuffs alone. He's almost the same as SP Matthew, where they both want to shut down their opponents with the skills, but Sagny can do a little bit more than that by also slowing them down. The big difference though between them is that Sagny might be on the slower side doing all that if he doesn't really have any mobility enhancement, whereas with SP Matthew, he can rely on himself to do that. Other than that, the only real issue that I see with them is his 1C where he can summon his owl. Even though it does have a 1 turn cooldown, I'm still unsure about if he can spam this or if he has to wait a few turns for the owl to actually disappear. I think he's actually pretty good, especially for stuff like the last stage for like the timeless trials, where if you have trouble dealing with the enemies, then you can actually slow them down if you are able to decrease their mobility. Stuff like that where there's like a lot of enemies, and if it's too much for you to handle, Sagny will be able to do that really well. On to the next character that Cian got is Amadeus, the half-man, half-horse hybrid. He's part of the Origin, Strategy, and Mythical faction. For his talent, the less health he has, the higher his stats are increased. He can move the enemy back 1 block when using AoE line skill. At the end of his turn, any kind of damage he does lets him gain a stack of Divine Tree Armor. I think lets him revive with a certain amount of health, which is stackable and cannot be dispelled. His unique 1C skill has a 2-turn cooldown that reaches 3 blocks long. It's a line AoE skill that ignores 15% of the enemy's defense. Alright, not bad. Then his other unique 1C skill has a 4-turn cooldown that targets one enemy, making them unable to take action, or in other words, it stuns them. Then his 2C skill has a 2-turn cooldown that reaches 3 blocks wide, but 1 block long. It reduces the enemy's attack and int for 2 turns, and range increase effect cannot be triggered, meaning that Balance Blade on him will not work with this skill, unfortunately. Finally, his 3C skill that has a 3-turn cooldown that reaches 1 block long. It has a command where allies gets a shield if they attack, as long as they are within 3 blocks of Amadeus. And int is increased by 10%. What? Okay, what? Why? This has gotta be a mistranslation because Amadeus is a physical attacker. So it's really strange that this would be the case. But I would also assume that it's not just int, it's also attack as well. I don't know. Maybe one of you guys can correct me in the comments somewhere. This is just really strange. For the passive on this skill, when he ends his turn on a wood, mountain, or grass tile, then his mobility is increased by 2 turns. Alright, pretty good, pretty good. Then the actual 3C itself, looks like you get 2 options to do. First is Force, where you select a target within 1 block to unleash 3 combos of AoEs. Same thing goes for the other one, Rush, Sweep, but in a different order. By using either of them, you'll be immune to debuffs while using this skill, and if the enemy has 5 times more than his HP, then his skill does 300% increased damage. Wow. Alright, so something that I really like about this skill is that it's actually a mixture of all of his other unique skills. So if you guys don't know what I'm talking about, the first strike of the AoE is the one that can stun the enemy for both of them. If you pick the Rush, then his 2C, and then his other 1C skill. And if you do Rush Sweep, it will be the stun AoE one. The other 1C where you ignore 50% of the enemy's defense. The last one would be his 2C skill. I actually really like that. He's a really interesting AoE attacker that wants to be really close to his enemies doing so, especially with his 3C, in order to maximize its damage output. Plus, it has a really great passive on top of that. That +2 mobility is really good. It is really, really good. Since his stats increases the less HP he has, you don't want too much HP on him, although you still want a little HP on him so that he doesn't die too easily from AoEs. Still, him being at low HP is a double-edged sword. Since you are getting the benefit of him doing more damage, he's also more than likely to die easily, even with the stats up. So I'm guessing that's where his multiple revives comes in. Again, that's me assuming that he can actually revive. Before we move on, I do want to talk about his 3C a little bit more. On that last part for the 300% damage increase, I hardly have a clue on it myself on how it works. Maybe it's something like his current HP, which sounds really crazy because there is a lot of ways that he can abuse that, or if it only counts towards his total HP. But other than that, I can see a few people using this guy. He has some insane damage potential, lots of mobility, and possibly a multiple revive. But the only thing that really sucks about him is that even though he is an AoE attacker, he does want to be extremely close to his enemies. Moving on from that, we got 2 new exclusive equipment. We got a helmet for Wehttam that gives 10% HP. If the enemy has Despair, then in battle, his damage will increase by 10%. And when using a skill, its cooldown is lowered by 1 turn. The other is for Clotaire that also gives him 10% HP. If any enemy has Broken Flame pattern, or in global terms, Shattered Flame, he gets a command effect pretty much that increases his team attack and int by 10%. And when using a skill to attack enemies, he gets a buff that increases his skill damage by 25%. Both are really great. It's pretty self-explanatory. As long as the enemy has this certain debuff, then you get a few benefits like being able to deal more damage. For the new catching skills that Cian got, the first one is for Shilinka, where her attack is increased by 5%. If her 3C doesn't kill, then its cooldown is reduced by 3 turns. The second is for the girl, Angelina. Finally, I've been waiting for this day. But sadly though, it's not enough for her to make a comeback. Her attack increases by 5% and has a 30% chance to buff her own attack for 4 turns when using a Act Again skill. Very unfortunate that she didn't get anything else, but it is what it is. Third is for Virash, also increases his attack. When he's in his Immortal effect, he can attack first. Last one is for Oliver, which will increase his attack and crit rate by 5%. If he's on a defensive tile, he can steal 1 extra buff when triggering his talent. In my opinion, the best ones are both Oliver and Virash, with Virash being the one that's more useful. Angelina is pretty solid. It allows her to be kinda dependent on her own without relying on anyone else to buff her up, if you are lucky enough to trigger that. Shilinka, I would say, got the worst treatment here. It's useful, I'll give it that, but even after triggering this, you'll have to wait like 1 or 2 turns to actually use her 3C again. There are some banners that might be worth looking forward to for some of you guys. There's a yearless wishlist banner that only goes up to Ricky and McLean. Pretty much, you select up to 2 characters for a increased drop rate. There's also a wishlist equipment banner if you're one of those that like to summon on these, as well as a new equipment banner featuring some new gears. We got this weapon that increases attack and AoE by 10%. I know it says range damage, but I can tell you that's not the case. Next is an armor that reduces AoE damage by 50% and increases the healing effect by 10%. The other is a helmet that gives 10% HP and a 50% chance to have your defense be increased when being attacked in battle. Last one is an accessory that gives 8% attack, so when you use a skill to enter a battle, it has a 30% chance to randomly reduce its cooldown by 1 or 2 turns. It's about time that we got a attack version of the Dimensional Jewel. Really liking this one. The weapon is really only great for characters like Suzette, Joshua, and Theon, since AoEs is where they shine the most. The armor can be pretty decent on some healers, but the helmet, kinda eh. I would say that this can be used on McLean, since he has a lot of defense increase, but there are better options that he would better off be using. Plus, if you're able to buff up your team, then this is pretty much useless. As for new content, they got the Forbidden Battleground, where you can get Lewin and Narm SP Stone. For global, we should be getting this in about 2 months, as well as this new type of Autochess game mode. I'm not really going to talk about this too much since we're still a bit far behind from actually getting this. So to put it simply, you can use many different characters, each with their own rarity. There's also the star level system where it does give them more stats increase, more skills, and better social options. During the match, you have a preparation phase where you can give equipments to your characters, particularly weapons and accessory, but can only hold 3 at a time. You can also select different tags or tactics that each does different things to level the playing field. In order to actually use these characters in battle, they will cost Astral Coins. You get more of these at the end of the battle by using specific tags and even selling those characters. There's a total of 3 rounds, so when those 3 rounds are used up, or if all characters on one side are defeated, the loser will lose HP. If they have 3 or actually no HP, then they completely lose the match. And the match will keep on going until there is 1 winner. By the way, these matches have up to 8 players, and of course we'll have some rewards. I'll probably go a little bit more in depth once it's actually arriving closer to global. Now to the part that some people will love, the new skins. For some of my Will peeps, we got the Echo of Light for Sagny and Amadeus. Looks pretty good, looking really nice. In the store with skin vouchers, you can get the Clotaire skin, also a nice looking one. Then for the Machalotto, it's a skin for Ashemar that includes 5 other previous skins from the pack. With all of that, that should be about everything that's going on in the CN side of Langrisser. Feel free to let me know in the comments what you guys think about all this. I think Amadeus 3C is pretty interesting with the AoE combo. The only one that I can think of that can do something very similar is Leonhardt. But if you guys enjoyed the video, feel free to leave a like and subscribe if you want to see more. And yeah, thanks for watching, your fellow